Code Explain says hi. Today we're going to talk about another array method, which is sum. But first, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Well, let's see an example where you need to use sum. So here I have an array called fruits, and it has 3 items. Now I want to know if this array here has at least 1 tomato. So I'm going to create a variable called hasTomato that's going to be set to true if my array has at least 1 tomato, or it's going to be set to false if my array fruits doesn't have any tomato. So what I need to do is I want to go through my items one by one and then check if they pass a test. So I'm going to check if the item.name here, you can see here the name is banana, tomato, and grapes. So I'm going to check if it's equal to tomato or not. So I'm going to start with the first one here. So its name is banana. And because this evaluates to false, I need to go to the next one here. And the next one's name is tomato equals tomato. This evaluates to true. So here I want to set my hasTomato variable to true and then break from the loop. So I don't want to go to the next one anymore. Because when I get to the second item, my condition here is satisfied. So that means that my fruits array has a tomato at least. And now let's go and see how can we achieve that using code. I'm going to use a for loop here. So I'm going to create my array fruits again, and then I'm going to set my variable hasTomato to false. So it's going to be initially assigned a boolean and the value is going to be false. And then I'm going to use a for loop. So I'm going to start from 0, the first element, and I want to stop at the last one here. And then each time I need to increment I by 1 to go to the next element. Now I'm going to create a const just to make my code more readable. So I'm going to call it item. So it's going to be equal to fruits with index I. When I is equal to 0, then item is going to be this object here, this element here. And then I want to check, to use an if statement here, if this element here satisfies a condition, and that condition is going to be item.name equals to tomato. So if this condition here evaluates to true, I want to go and set my variable here hasTomato that is initially set to false. I'm going to set it here to true. And then what I need to do right away, I need to break out the loop here. So I don't want to go to the next one anymore. And now when I run this code here, what's going to happen is for the first element here, banana equals tomato, that's going to evaluate to false, and this code won't get executed. So I'm going to the next one by incrementing the I by 1. Now when I get to the second element here, will be evaluated to true. Then I'm going to set hasTomato to true, and then I'm going to break. So I don't need here to go to the third element. And if I console log here my variable hasTomato, it's going to be equal to true. And now I'm going to check if my fruits array has at least 1 apple here. So I'm going to set this again to false and then start from the first element, check if that element's name is an apple. If it is true, then I'm going to set hasApple to true and break. If it's not, I'm just going to go to the next one. So here, apparently, it's not going to evaluate to true. So I'm going to the next one. This also will not evaluate to true. Then I'm going to the next one. That also will not evaluate to true. And that's the end of my for loop. hasApple is never set to true. So if I console log hasApple, it's going to be false, the initial value here. Well, now let's go and see how we can accomplish this using the sum method. So like all the other methods, so I need to call sum on my array, in this case my array fruits, and then I need to pass in a function. Now the sum method here will go and call my function here on each of these elements, and each time it's gonna check whether that element passes the test or not. Now, because I'm passing a function to another function, we call this function a callback function. Now let's talk about the callback function. So you want to create a function using the keyword function, and then you need to give it a name, any name as long as it's not reserved, and then the parameters that is going to be passed by sum to your callback function are. the value, which is the element itself, so this whole object, then this whole object again, and then this third object. Now the second parameter is going to be the index, so 0 for this one here, 1, and then 2. And then the last one is the array itself. So if I call sum on my fruits array, then the third parameter here, array, is going to be fruits. Because sometimes from within your function here, you don't have access to fruits array. So in that case, you can just use the third parameter. Now inside your function here, you can do any logic you want, but at the end, you must return a condition that's going to be evaluated to false or true. If the condition here evaluates to false for all of these elements, for all the elements in your array, then sum will return false. But if the condition here evaluates to true for at least one of the elements in your array, then sum will return true. Now let's go and achieve the same thing here with sum. So I'm going to go and create my fruits array, just like here. Then I'm going to go and create a function called tomato. And then I'm going to pass in item. So I can call this whatever I want. I can call it value, item, element, I, etc. So any name I want. This is just an argument or a parameter. And then the next one is the index, and the last one is the array. And now because I don't need the index or the array, I'm just going to go and remove both of them and use just the item that's going to represent these elements here. Now what I want to do is I'm going to return a condition. I don't want to do any logic here, so I'm just going to return a condition. So I'm going to use this same condition here. So I'm just going to use item.name equals to tomato. And now when I use fruits.some method and then pass in my tomato callback function here, so what's going to happen is that sum will go and call tomato on my first element here, and so my item here will be this object here. So item.name is going to be banana. Banana doesn't equal tomato, so this will evaluate to false. Then sum will call tomato on the next one here. Then the item will be this object. Item.name is going to be tomato. This will evaluate to true, and that's going to lead to returning true by the sum method. So here, if I take a look on my console, if I try to get the value of my hash tomato, it's going to be set to true, just like here. And now apparently this code here is more readable than this one here. So I can just like look at this code and know what it means. So here you can say fruits that has some tomato. True. So it has at least one tomato. Now when sum calls this function here, for example, on this item here, and the condition is not satisfied, the same thing for this one, the same thing or for all the items in your array, then sum will return false. If some elements here, if at least one element passes the test, then sum will return true. Now, if you don't want to create a function here and then pass it as a callback function, you can pass in directly an inline function to sum. Again, the first parameter is the element, second index, and the last one is the array. Now let's see the same example from before. So I'm going to call .sum on my fruits array. I'm going to pass in my anonymous function, and then I'm going to pass in as parameter item only, which is the element, which is these elements here, these objects here, and then I'm going to return my condition. Now if I run this code here again, I'm going to get hash tomato set to true because my fruits array has at least one tomato. Now you can also use an arrow function as an inline function passed to your sum method. So I'm going to call again sum, and then I'm going to pass in this time an arrow function. So again, the first parameter is going to be called item, and then I'm going to return item.name equals tomato. Now again, I'm going to get the same result, hash tomato is equal to true. Now if I set this to apple, for example, I'm going to get false because none of these elements here will make this condition evaluate to true. And now if you're familiar with arrow functions, when your arrow function all it does is return a value, you can just go and remove the return keyword along with the curly braces. And also, if only one parameter or argument is passed to your arrow function, you can just get rid of these parentheses. So this code here will look like this. So I'm going to use item without the parentheses because it's just one single argument, then my arrow here, and then my condition. So user name equals tomato. And this will return the same result like before. Has tomato is going to be equal to true. And now you can see here that from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines of code to just 1, 2 lines of code. And we achieve the same results. And also this code here is more reliable than this one here. Well, now let's go and see a recap of what we have seen so far. So some can take in a callback function. That callback function can be an inline function where the first parameter is the element, the second is the index, and the third is the array. And now the argument that I'm going to talk about is the one you can pass in as the second parameter to the sum method here, which is the this argument. So we're talking here about the this keyword in JavaScript. Well, the this keyword here refers to an object. So the object that contains that this keyword. So let's see an example here. So I'm going to start here with an array of numbers 918542, and I'm going to call sum on my numbers array, and I'm going to set this to a const called has5. So I'm going to check if my numbers array has a 5 number in it. So I'm going to pass in an inline function, then my first parameter is going to be called value instead of element or item that we used before. And then I'm going to return a condition, so value equals 5. Of course, because there is 5 here, so has5 is going to be set to true. Now, I don't care about has5, what we care about is the this keyword. So I'm going to console log the this keyword. Now what's going to happen when I console log this? So I'm going to go and call my function here on the first element, which is 9. So it's going to console log the window, and then it's going to return false because 9 doesn't equal to 5. Then it's going to go to the next one, which is 1 here. It's going to again return or console log window, and then the value is going to be not equal to 5 because 1 doesn't equal to 5, so false. So it's going to go to 8 again, console log window, and then it's going to evaluate again to false because 8 doesn't equal to 5, and then it's going to go to the next one, which is 5. It's going to again console log the this, which is going to be window here. And then because value equals 5 evaluates to true, 5 equals 5. So the sum here will break. So it's not going to go to this element here and this one here. So I'm just going to see for window object console log to my console. So here when you call this inside a function, this will always refer to the global object. And now because I'm running this code here inside the web browser, the global object is the window object. That's why I get the window object here 4 times. Now sometimes you want to change the this object or the object that this refers to. In that case, you need to use this second argument here, the this argument. So I'm going to create here an object that has properties and methods, I don't care, or I can just use a value. So I'm going to pass that as the second parameter beside my callback function to sum. Now if I run this code, instead of getting window, I'm going to get this object here. So now whenever I use the this keyword inside my function here, the this keyword will always refer to my object, the one that I passed as the second parameter. And I think that's all you need to know about the sum method. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and see you in the next tutorial.